Morning, everyone here. Good morning, live stream. My name's Alex Taylor, and I'm a licensed prayer practitioner here. And let's take a moment to go within and settle ourselves. And if it's comfortable for you, to close your eyes. And take a moment to be in gratitude for this brand new day and this brand new morning that has never been before. And I know that this service is blessed, that each one of us here is blessed, and that we connect with one another through spirit, through love, through light, and that everything unfolds today in absolute perfection. We are guided on our path, we are open to guidance, and we are filled with the presence. And I give thanks for the music, RL and Max. I give thanks for the live stream people, Reverend John, the Leadership Council, everyone that keeps our center going 24/7. I am so grateful for this, and I am so grateful for each one of you that is here today, as together we say, and so it is. So, as it is on the Saturday or the Friday before I'm up here, I get out lots of books and I look and I look and I look and I read and I read and I read, and sometimes it's right there and sometimes it's like, what? And so I found myself yesterday with 10 books on the dining room table with all of my favorite teachers, and I was like, no, I mean, it's always a good couple hours, to read all that good stuff, and nothing was clicking. So I have this book that I bought a long time ago that's kind of a coffee table book, and it's called How Many Days of the Week Can Be Extraordinary? And so I just picked it up, and I was like, well, this is not something I ever thought I would be reading up here. And it's just this beautiful, sweet little book. And this is what it says in the flap. How many days of the week can be extraordinary? One of our greatest illusions is that someday we will have more time to savor and enjoy the things we really love. But one thing leads to another, and someday never comes. In the rush to pursue our daily routines, life speeds by and we forget to live. But we are happier when we realize that life is not an obligation, it's an adventure. And it says, let this book be your wake-up call, your guide and your inspiration. Let it remind you that this is your life and there is no such thing as any insignificant day. And then there's a quote by Annie Dillard. How we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. And I'm going to read a couple of pages from this. It's a little story. One day, a philosophy professor brought a large glass jar and some beautiful river rocks to class with him. Raise your hands when the jar is full, he instructed the students, and he began putting the big rocks into the jar. Soon the lid would no longer fit, and all of the students raised their hands to indicate that the jar was full. The professor then pulled out a bag of smaller black and white pebbles and poured them into the jar. As the pebbles rolled down, they filled in the little gaps between the big river rocks. The students smiled and raised their hands. This time, the jar was completely full. Then the professor produced a bag of sand and began pouring it into the jar. When the sand had filled the tiny gaps between the rocks and the pebbles, he triumphantly placed the lid on the jar and asked his class if the jar was now full. They all clapped and they agreed, yes, it's full. At that point, the professor opened the lid and slowly poured 2 cups of coffee into the jar. The coffee completely filled in the tiniest gaps between the rocks, the pebbles, and the sand, grains of sand. Now, he said, life is very much like this jar. The river rocks represent the most important things in life, such as your ethics, your family, your loved ones, and your health. Even if you lost everything else, your life would be full with these important things in it. The pebbles are the things in our lives that are pretty important, but our happiness shouldn't depend on them. Things like our job, our house, our car, etc. Finally, the sand represents everything else, the countless small, busy things in our lives. If we fill up our jar with sand first, then we won't have any room for the river rocks or the pebbles. If we fill our lives with just the small stuff or the busy stuff, we won't have any room for the things that mean the most to us. After a brief moment of silence, one of the students asked, "Professor, what does the coffee represent?" "Ah, I'm glad you asked," replied the professor. "It means that no matter how full your life is, there is always room for a cup of coffee with a friend." And then they have some questions, what currently occupies space in my life? What are my true river rocks? What are my pebbles or sand that I might spend too much time on? And finally, who should I take to coffee this week? And so now we will do our affirmation, which is in your order of service in red. Spirit's life is my life now. This is true in all that I perceive as good and all that I perceive as imperfect. Thank you. All right.
Morning, everybody. I know, I don't know what's going on here. Sometimes I feel like a 10-year-old. There's so much junk in my pockets, and you got a mask, and you got all this other stuff, and good morning. I'm Reverend John, if I've not met you, and good morning, everyone at home. You're not at home in your robes, oh my gosh. Just the other day, she said, I really should come, but it's so comfortable at home. And I said, I know, but I still have to come anyway, So, I know. What was I going to talk about? So last Monday, I was having what I call a Mindless Monday. So what some of you don't realize is that a significant portion of my job is that I have to manage our business that we all own together. And we don't often think of that when you have a faith community, that things just don't happen unless people do them. And so Monday seems to be where things gather of all left-brainy kind of stuff. And usually a pile of just weird details that don't seem important, but you have to do them anyway. And that's why I call it Mindless Mondays. You think often in ministry we're doing all these amazing things and we're talking and we're working on our emotions and our spiritual path. And on Monday I'm usually like QuickBook reports, deposit slips, things like that. And so, my mind was kind of going, So I thought I'll do something I don't normally do. Since I'm doing left brain things, I need to make a list. I'm just really not a list kind of person. Usually I'm just kind of free form, but I have to do a list here. And so I reached into the top right drawer, and I've got a few notebooks over there, and there's a notebook this is a page from it. And as I'm taking it out, it was like I was looking at this for the first time, and it brought me back to a message that I got a couple years ago. So this is from a vacation I took not in October, a year previous October. And let's go back in our little time machine. So it was pre-vaccines. We were all like, what in the heck are we doing? Can I even leave my house, let alone drive to go to a vacation or something like that? It was like, what are we doing? It was just all so fresh and all that. And so my partner and I decided that, we needed to get away. We do a little road trip to the Oregon coast. And I think you went here, Max, as well. So we went to this great place called Bay Point Landing. And so again, a different experience we want, especially with that lockdown thing. And what they do is that they have Airstreams set up as hotel rooms. So you go to your own Airstream. So I've always liked the idea of an RV. I never liked the idea of pulling an RV. So I thought, perfect, this is great. It's like camping out and you've got this tricked out Airstream and it's right on the bay and Pacific Ocean and Oregon would be perfect. And it was great. It was really wonderful, and we're thinking of going back there again, especially since we, have a newer dog, and he doesn't do hotel rooms, and people don't want to take him more than a couple hours because he's energetic. He loves life. and he wants to include you in everything. You know, he's a chocolate lab, 1-year-old. So just know that what that energy is. So my partner's mom for a couple days, like a week, is like, no, afternoon's good. But anyway, so we're considering going back. And I pulled this out. So this is from here. And right at the top, and I remember looking at this when we went to our Airstream, it says, "You are here." In big, all caps, bold sort of thing. You are here. And first of all, this is a perfect message for today. But again, it really struck me as we, landed at our Airstream, and it was so great and wonderful. And I thought, well, what do they mean? This is an interesting message. Have you ever gotten a message like this at a hotel kind of place? I mean, there's usually a notepad, and it usually has Hilton or whatever is on there. And especially at that time, when we were in lockdown, to me it was like, you are here. You're on vacation. It's okay to be on vacation. You didn't need to bring your laptop. Yes, the world has lost its mind, but you're on the Pacific Ocean right now, and it's okay. Just be here. And it was almost kind of a difficult concept to get our brains around because the difficulties in the world seem so huge and big. I mean, politics are going crazy. And again, it was pre-vaccine and all that. And how could we possibly just be here and be present and know that there was a reason why we drove to the coast, and that to just allow it to be a perfect spot where we were. And it was. But as I was doing Mindless Monday, I thought, well, this is such a perfect message any day, but particularly that day for me. Just be here. Because again, yes, things have moved on in the world in many ways, but there are many things that are so unresolved, isn't there? We thought we'd have this whole COVID thing licked by now, didn't we? I remember when that first Sunday was like, oh, we might have to close for a couple of weeks. Oh yeah, just put me on for 3 weeks back to brunch. We'll be back. And it's interesting. We didn't know what we were getting into, basically. And so it has changed, but it's not that point where we are running on autopilot. It's just you really have to consider a lot of things. So as we are in our present, we have an interesting and I think even difficult relationship with our recent past. And we certainly have an odd relationship with our perceived futures. Like, who knows what's coming, basically. And so for me to think, we are here, and we'll talk about here for a moment, that there's a lot of work we need to do on our past and our hopes for the future. And I mean, that sounds kind of counterintuitive in a sense, like John just said, be here. But this is keeping us from being here. And as I was thinking about the past, I came across a little passage from Gary Zukov in The Seat of the Soul about forgiveness. And in my mind, I took forgiveness down a different road. Often when we think of forgiveness, we think of our enemies. People that did us wrong, that person that slighted us in the market or whatever, big and small sins and crimes and misdemeanors that have happened in our lives that we energetically take on. And we all have. And we think of it, again, person-to-person forgiveness of coming to terms with something that didn't go well. And, of course, the way that I teach forgiveness here, it is not a absolution. It is energetically shifting yourself so what's happened before no longer affects you in the here and now. That makes sense. So it's like, yes, I still know it happened. I'm not denying that it happened, but I'm not reliving it. Have you noticed that if someone, maybe this week, said something mean to you, a new enemy, didn't you replay it? Didn't you replay it several times? Didn't you have a whole repertoire of what I should have said? Didn't you? Yeah, next time I'm ready. And we usually never live out those fantasies. But the thing is that we energetically relive over and over and over again on a personal basis. So when I was reading this about forgiveness, I was taking it to the next step of energetically separating ourselves from the last couple of years. Not to deny that it's all happened, not to say that it's all over, and that it's yippee-skippy and time to go do something else, but it's saying that it's almost like this whole COVID thing and politics thing and the politician that you just love to hate kind of thing is a whole huge forgiveness issue, meaning of we carry this negative aspect with us that we play over and over and over again. So let me read this now that I've set it up a little bit. Again, I think of this, again, not so much forgiving another person who did something unkind. Think of it as the last 2 years. So he says, an authentically empowered person is one who forgives. Forgiveness is not a moral issue, it is an energy dynamic. Forgiveness means that you do not carry the baggage of an experience. When you choose not to forgive, the experience that you do not forgive sticks with you. When you choose not to forgive, it is like agreeing to wear dark, gruesome sunglasses that distort everything. Forgiveness means that you do not hold others responsible for your experiences. When you hold someone responsible for what you experience, you lose power. When you forgive, you release critical judgment of yourself as well as of others. You lighten up. So let's think of this whole COVID political world that we have been experiencing these last couple of years, and almost think of it as an entity or something. Boy, do we need to energetically separate ourselves. Again, not deny that this is going on, because I think it is ripe with lessons for us to learn. But at the same time, I think we, again, have energetically taken this on in a way that has become unhealthful. That of course we have opinions and things, and we are so ready to interject our opinion, sometimes with great anger. Again, as I point out, people act out in public. You know, my sister told me a story this week, and you've heard part of this story on the news. No, my sister was not arrested or anything like that. So my sister is on ground zero of dealing with this entity that we call this 2-year COVID political kind of weird stuff. She is a flight attendant. And it was one of her closest buddy co-workers, one that had to hit someone on the head with a coffee pot last week because they were trying to open the door. Because they wanted to make a point about they didn't like vaccines. I don't know how opening the door and everyone shooting out is a statement about vaccines. And again, whatever your opinion might be about them, but do you really think opening a plane door at 30,000 feet is kind of the way to make your point? I mean, I didn't, but it just thought, if I had talked to my sister like 3 years ago and said, you know, I got a psychic vibration, one of your friends on the plane, they're gonna hit someone with a coffee pot, she would be like, you have really lost it this time. You know, you need to ground yourself. You need to be here now, because that's never going to happen. But the thing is, it has turned into this looming kind of figure almost where things like that can happen. So I think part of being here now is to do the work to look at these last couple of years. In many ways, they have been traumatic. They have been difficult. And they're not over. And at the same time, if we're going to be here now, we have to begin to put it into perspective. Had an interesting way to do this in a small way from a friend of mine the other day. He said, you know, I have a family full of people that don't think like I do. Can you relate? And it's especially my brother. And he says, every time we talk or have a family thing, it's a fight. He says his thing, I say my thing. We never change each other's mind. It goes badly. Someone leaves. And if you've not been in a situation like that, you know someone who has been in a situation like that. And he said he changed his mind about this, and he talked to his brother about it. And he says, here's how I would like to do this now. He says, I am more than happy as your brother to listen to whatever you have to say. But I don't want it to be an argument anymore. I'm just here to listen, and I'm just going to listen. And maybe you would do the same for me. And not as a way of debating like we have, because we've proven that doesn't work or get us anywhere. But I am willing, as your brother who loves you, to just take it in. Again, not respond. And if it seems appropriate, I might have some things to say, again, for you not to respond or to say that you're even wrong, even though you are. But you know how we do that. I'm going to be the bigger person because you're wrong anyway. And he said they're just trying this out, but he said it's taken that charge out of it, which is, I think, what we need to do. And as I know of certain people in my life and my family too, I'm not going to change their mind, even though, are they on camera today? Even though I think they've lost it sometimes, but they think the same about me. So as they say, what's that term, holding space for someone? I mean, being present for them and saying, well, this is where they are right now. This is where we are in this world right now. And I don't know how we're going to resolve this, but maybe I can just be present with it and listen to them even though I have no agreement with what they're saying. That's not an easy thing to do, is it? Like if we all said, okay, everyone raise your hand, you're going to commit to doing this today with the one person in your life like that. Like, oh boy. I mean, it sounds great in theory, doesn't it? I mean, it sounds really high and spiritually high, and this is what I'm going to do. But imagine you with that person. Okay, I'm just going to take it in. It's not an easy path. And so, in a sense, it's not to be passive in our lives, but to choose when is it time to step forward and when is it time just to listen and be present. And so that is one way to start to deal with the past a bit. And to also realize that things have been changing so quickly, the past is really past. I mean, things are like, they're clipping along. So to be, to holding something from a year or two ago, it's so dated in a sense. We have new things to be upset about. We have improved ways. We've had upgrades of how to be upset. Why are we upset with a year ago? That's so long ago. But as we're being in the present, and just think of yourselves, at least for me, there have been points in this last year that I just felt so burdened by recent events. Helpless. What can I do? When will it end? When will people stop fighting? When will my sister literally stop putting her life in her hands when she's a flight attendant in the air because of people bringing these issues into their airplane flights? So, to have a better relationship with our past and to energetically let it go and to open up to something different here. But before we get here again, so our futures. Who can plan anymore these days? In fact, I was on a call with some of my colleagues, ministerial colleagues, and for those who don't know, I have a volunteer position within Centers for Spiritual Living. I'm called a regional support coordinator. Doesn't that sound, amazing? Like I do all sorts of things, and basically, I listen to people. There are a handful of ministries and their ministers that I talk to, and it's not saying like, "What are you doing?" It's just listen, unload, basically, and it really has been a great experience. But anyways, I had a Zoom call with some other people that do the same thing in our organization. There's 13 of us, and for some reason there was only six of us on this call, which meant actually we could each share a little bit more deeply and talking about people's relationships, especially in our spiritual communities or nonprofits, with the future. And thinking, how do we even begin to plan? In fact, one person laughed. She says, you know what? My board of trustees thinks we need to do a budget. Like, how do we even know how we're going to spend our money? I mean, it's not being, not in integrity, but it's like, who knows how to do it? I mean, we have a budget here, and it's kind of like, well, it's kind of like our best stab at what might happen. But there's no idea of thinking in quote-unquote normal time, oh, here would be a great new area to go in. So let's take some of the funds here and go over here. Or let's ask our community, say, would you really like to have this new big thing? So let's see if we can fund it together. There's none of that anymore right at the moment. We're kind of like, you are here. Again, one of our big topics is starting to revision and recreate a youth program. That is so much like, who knows how that is going to happen? I mean, we're going to start bringing people together and talking and visioning and praying about it, but it's still like, it's such a foreign object at the same time because of where we have been and where we are now. And of course, we're still doing that, but still the idea of long-range planning is kind of odd a little bit. And I don't know how it is for some of you, because so much has changed over these last couple of years. People that, on one hand, people say, oh, we're stuck, nothing's happening. But actually, it has been an accelerated rate of change. I don't know if you've noticed how people have moved and gone here and come here and done all sorts of things when they thought they were stuck. And it just opened up to, oh, oddly enough, we're in lockdown, but we're making major changes in our life. Isn't that strange? So it's almost like we were put in our corners to think for a while and says, oh, I'm going to move to another state. Or, gee, I don't have to work in an office anymore. I can do this instead. So it's brought amazing changes. So as some people will say, in setting an intention to change your life, to have a visual imprint in your mind of what that looks like, I hate to say, is not a waste of time, but it's probably not the best use of your time. And it really does get back, as we often talk about setting intentions, is that it's not so much about the picture of what it looks, but it's the quality of it. It's the spiritual truth of it. It's in the essence of the experience that you're hoping to bring into your life. So rather than say, this has to look like this and be here, to say that, what is the essence of what you want to experience? So again, back to our talking about youth, I don't know what it's going to look like. I have not got a clue what this is going to look like, or who's going to do it, or how much money it'll need. But I do know that the essence of it is that we want families and children to feel served and spiritually uplifted. That's all I have for today. So as I am envisioning this, or as we're bringing people together to envision it, to bring something like that yes, we think it's all about structure, which eventually it is, but to say that, so how does a program that we have no idea what it looks like or who it involves, supports family and has them, as well, mostly their children, feel spiritually uplifted and empowered in some way? And so, as you can get in the weeds in a sense, so you kind of get away from that and go, well, how's it going to happen? You still need to come back here. Okay, what did we say a few minutes ago when we came in the room? Okay, families supported and feeling spiritually uplifted and empowered. So whenever you start to go kind of, you go back to that. So as we are thinking about the futures, again, the details, who knows? What is it that we want our lives and our world to look like? That little synopsis that we can hold on to, that in a sense, as I tell people, that if you have that synopsis, if it shows up physically in any form, wouldn't you be okay with it? I mean, just think of that. We get stuck on the form. But if you go back to that little core idea or spiritual truth about it, and if you stick to that and say, yeah, if that happens, I don't care how it shows up. So that's where I think being in you are here now for the future is. Like, don't know how it's going to show up. But the be here now is to hold that core idea, not only for the future, but for right where we are right now. So we're looking at the past, in a sense, releasing our energetic attachment. We're looking at the future, releasing our have to control exactly how it has to be. And then look at, as Eckhart Tolle says, the power of the present moment or the power of now. And in fact, I think we need to revive that book in a sense. It was like The Thing, what, like 10, 15 years ago, wasn't it? It was The Thing. Even Oprah got on board with it. And we showed like classes that she did over here. So in a sense, you are here. And to begin to understand that this is where we create things, and there's more than what the eyes can see. That we can sometimes be so blinded by our past and our hopes for the future that we don't see what we can do right here, right now, what amazing things are available right now. Even in times like this, in moments when we can feel so restricted. Because there are some days, well, I can't do this right now, or I can't do this right now, where the infection rate went up, so I'm not going to go out to eat for a couple of weeks. I mean, just like I can't do this, as opposed to saying, what can you do? So as I was thinking of you are here, so where's another place that often shows up? It shows up on maps. You notice? You go on a trail. You are here. All our tourists here. Here's the whole thing of the Wood River Valley, but here you are. You are here. And the thing that came to mind as I was looking at this week, I thought of the maps at Disneyland. There's a really good connection here. So I grew up in Southern California. So Disneyland was like my backyard. I mean, not literally, but you always went once or twice a year. So I can still give a great tour of Disneyland. Disney World confuses me a little bit. But Disneyland, I really know. And so they've got those things. You are here. Here's what's interesting about Disneyland and what they do really well. They create encapsulated worlds they call lands that is so immersive that when you are in that land, that's all you see. Has everyone been to a Disneyland, Disney World at some point? I know you guys, practically like have a years past sort of thing. And they're really sly about it. Once you're in that quote unquote land, there's no evidence of any other land. Have you noticed that? That if you are in Tomorrowland or Fantasyland or Frontierland or Main Street, you're there. They're so sly about it. You can't say, oh, there's the other one over there most of the times. But here's the thing about the maps, you are here, that I found so interesting as a kid. I don't know, it's like the light bulb went off when I was like at 12. So you're like, you are here, and who knows, I'm in Tomorrowland or something. But over here is this kind of, I guess it's a fence, but how they dress things up, you don't even think it's a fence. 30 feet over is another land. And I can't see it. And they're very sly in that if I want to go over there, I have to go here, exit the land, go to kind of neutral zone at the castle, and then go to another land, and then I could be there. But if I could climb the fence, I could be there like, boom, right there. So what I love about this analogy I was playing with, there is so much available in the present moment, and I can't see it. It's there. And sometimes the barriers are things that I've put up. But the only time, again, I'm going to leave the Disneyland thing soon, don't worry about it. So the only time that you can get a wide idea of all that is available is at, I call the neutral zone in front of the castle. So if you've ever been to Disneyland with friends over the years, and you split off because, no, I want to go to Tomorrowland, no, I want to go here. Okay, I'll meet you in front of the castle in 2 hours. That's like the neutral zone. But when you're in front of that, that's the only place that you can see the entries of most of the other places. So being here right now, you might say, let's go to the castle. let me be present here and take this all in of what's available. And there is so much that it's not as limiting as you might think. And again, go kind of in your mind over the last couple years, if we've difficult times, whined a little bit, complained a little bit, fought with our friends. Again, how much change has happened in your life? I bet there's been some significant change. If not on the outside, on the inside. And that being here right now acknowledges that. Now, I came across a quote from the New Testament that I really like, which really kind of states where we are right now, and we'll end it today. It says, this is by St. Paul, it says, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind. And through your discernment of the power of the presence of the divine within you, you will know what is good, acceptable, and perfect." So the renewal of your mind, which I refer to it as simply getting over yourself. What you thought was important is probably not as important as you thought. What is as vital from the past that you can't let go of is not so vital. The renewing of the mind is letting go of attachments of how certain things have to be right in this central point to open up to the possibilities that you haven't been able to see up to this point. And this thing of to come to in discernment of what is good, acceptable, and perfect, and it's really very subjective. We all have our own path. We all have that essence of the divine within us. And it's not like there is this absolute divine plan. There is a divinity within you that pushes you towards what is perfect and acceptable and whole for you. And that's the point of being right here, is to quiet things down just a little bit to see what, in a sense, is your next step. Not necessarily the huge big thing of 20 steps and all that. It's just a phrase that someone taught me a few weeks ago. What is your next indicated step? I think that's all we're up for with planning these days. What is your next indicated step? What feels like the next thing, the natural step to take in this crazy world that we live right now? What is it? And to be willing to give up the anxiety of not knowing much beyond that. Because there's great anxiety, maybe it's for me sometimes. So I don't know what happens next month. Does anyone really know what happens next month? But as I look over the next few days, I can get an idea of the next indicated step. And I know that as I even intellectually recognize that presence of the divine within me, I know that it is pushing me one step at a time, at the very least. I think that's the best that we can hope for right now. And I think that's not to say that's less than even. I think that's an amazing gift to know that there's something greater we are part of, and I can always know my next step. So let's just take that within this morning. And first of all, let's give thanks for that. Let's give thanks for so many opportunities and possibilities, even in a time that we have convinced ourselves otherwise. We forgive our past. We forgive the last 2 years. We energetically disconnect ourselves from it and no longer allow it to control where we are right here. We give up our sense of needing to control exactly our futures. But we do come to great clarity of what that essence of our futures need to be. Of being joy-filled, of being abundant, of having a sense of purpose in the world. That we know what that essence is and leave everything else aside. And we say to ourselves each day, you are here. What is the next step? And we know that inquiry is answered. So again, we give thanks. And when, having made this statement of acceptance, of affirmation, we simply release it, we let it go. We let it go into the heart and mind of spirit, knowing that anytime you truly let something go, amazing things happen. And so it is.